It's Cineboys to Cinemen, and it's episode 60.
It's episode 60.
60. Hope you're well wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, Sing Sing.
Yep.
A film that sees us return to more low-budget territory.
Independent cinema.
After a bit of time spent sort of languishing in the CGI-drenched, popcorn-stuffed world of blockbuster cinema.
Yeah, the swamp of popular entertainment.
Yeah, with all the proles.
Yeah.
It's a good opportunity for. It's nice to go back to something a little bit smaller.
Yeah, I mean, my cinema experience with this one was a lot more positive. Not necessarily because of the. I'm not saying that popular cinema is lesser at all. I have some wonderful times recently, like watching Twisters, for example, but I don't know why there's just something special about seeing something that's a bit more pricey, but like you kind of feel a bit more. I felt a bit more comfortable and a bit more kind of willing to drink it in.
It's certainly a film that, you know, it's a bit of sort of a cliche to say it, but it will stay with you in a way that is. It will linger with you more so than Alien Romulus will, you know. And I know that's not necessarily the point of films like Alien Romulus, to sort of linger with you, but
there's just something special about returning to this realm for me anyway. And I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's just nice. It was nice. It was nice for me.
Yeah,
and for me, it speaks to the power of the film, because I went to see it at a cinema that wasn't necessarily an independent one, but I think the fact that it's got this far and it's kind of enjoyed quite a healthy, long release speaks to the power of the film, I think.
Agreed, yes. As it's a film about the Sing Sing Correctional Facility, which is a prison,
yep,
we're going to talk a little bit about prison films.
Oh!
Oh, bloody hell.
Prison movies.
Oh, prison films.
Yeah.
Because Sing Sing treated the subject matter that tends to sort of permeate through a lot of prison films with a lot more tact than most other prison films that certainly come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think even the good ones, the ones that are considered good, and in some cases like one of the best films ever made, considered by many anyway. There's a kind of operatic. They're very, like you were saying to me earlier, like they're very large and they're full of sort of almost an excess of spirit and goodwill that can come across as quite saccharine, I think, sometimes.
Agreed. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to talk about that in a bit more detail and as like why that is. And then you have the kind of bargain bin territory on the other end, which is stemmed from the success of TV shows like Prison Break, etc.
Yes, yeah. God, funny, like in the discussion about prison films or sort of the allure of the setting in media more broadly, that didn't come to mind.
Yeah,
which is a bit embarrassing considering it's Prison Break. But yes, we also have a little special guest. We are currently dog sitting at the moment.
Yes.
So we have the dear Bernie with us.
Yeah.
Say some words.
Ben, insert dog bark.
He's barking fucking loads earlier.
So
no. He's a good boy, aren't you? As soon as you start rolling.
Yeah, let off some fireworks, it'll go mental.
Which we will do inside shortly for your entertainment.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yes.
Get into it?
Let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void.
So then, prison films. It's interesting that you, in the sort of intro, alluded to the sort of bargain bin territory, again, which is something I've not considered, but that's something I'd really like to talk about later on. But when I think about prison films away from the bargain bin, I think they're either sort of empowering tales of the human spirit against adversity.
Yeah.
So the adversity typically is society, right? So socioeconomic horror, sort of institutional racism,
yes,
all of these kinds of things.
Siphoned in kind of from, it's kind of shaking its fist at the system.
Yes,
quite broadly as well.
But sort of through the lens of a kind of like almost sort of with the intent of appeasing as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So in a way that is very sort of, as we said earlier, like, you know, very dramatic and operatic in the way that it sort of conveys those themes and ideas. But there are also prison films that really sort of languish in the sort of gritty, depressing horror of prison.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like Prophet
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and Scum with Ray Winstone.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So they're films that really, the sort of bread and butter of those kinds of films. Not necessarily, probably more so Scum in this case, but it's about the sort of the real grotty nature of prison life.
Yeah.
And again, some social commentary, but I think a lot of whenever I speak to people about that film, they just tend to talk about how Ray Winstone batters someone with a snooker ball in a sock.
Yeah.
It's almost like exploitation in a way.
It's overarched by that kind of exploitation-y type.
Yeah.
Stuff,
which definitely ties into that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, what better setting than an all-male kind of testosterone-fueled nightmare interior?
Yes, yeah.
To let those kind of things stew and brood and develop and like grow like a sort of parasite.
Yeah, and it's like a real setting, as you say, for that sort of bolshy, hyper masculine sort of behaviour.
The kind of thing that the film Bronson attempts to satirise a little bit.
Yeah.
As you know, some people may not know that it's a satire. Some people, I think, take that at face value, which I don't think it's meant to really.
No, I think you're right, and it's funny that part of the struggle that film would have to be seen as a satire is the fact it is Bronson, who seems to have, he's sort of a cult figure, isn't he? And I think he has a certain appeal among a certain kind of a certain kind of men.
Yes, definitely.
That happens with a lot of films. Also, I was just on the subject of films that get misrepresented by their audience. Films like American Psycho.
Yeah.
There's a real big sort of meme thing around, sort of the Meninist culture to use him as their sort of standard bearer.
I mean, it's all over like Instagram.
Always
reels.
him like pouting in agreement,
Yeah, it's like
or
you're
like
not meant to be with him.
Yeah, exactly. Or like Wolf of Wall Street or Fight Club.
Fight Club,
I mean, these are sort of more mainstream examples, but
Fight Club is a classic example.
Yeah, all films that like have a sort of a theme which has sort of been deliberately misconstrued by an audience to sort of see the world in a far more depressing light, or cast a depressing light upon their environment around them. Anyway, but it's interesting that these films tend to exist in that way, and I guess we should probably go for the big hitter, Shawshank.
Yeah, let's talk about
IMDb's number one still.
It was for a really long time. I think it periodically gets overtaken by The Godfather.
Okay, so those two are duking it out.
Yeah, and the Dark Knight briefly took it over as well. But yeah, Shawshank's a really interesting one because I actually prefer The Green Mile. I think Green Mile's a better film. There's something about... I don't hate Shawshank at all. I think it's really well made, and it was sort of Frank Darabont's time to shine, right?
Yeah. Bernie.
There's just something about it which I actually think as soon as the revelation of him having escaped happens, it just dips into sort of a kind of weird hyper-realistic film.
Yeah.
For me, anyway. I don't know why. And it does speak to Stephen King's sometimes kind of weakness and his foray into territory, which is... I know a lot of his work is warranted because it's supernatural and stuff, but with this one, it's like, all right, I'm not buying this anymore. My suspension of disbelief has kind of ended.
Right.
But there's something quite simple about The Green Mile. I know it's another Stephen King adaptation, but it doesn't... Although there's a lot of kind of magical realism in that film, and it's criticised for that sometimes, especially in more recent years. There's something simple about it which I prefer, and it feels a bit more grounded and a bit more like...
I guess the more depressing nature of the ending perhaps would do that.
Yeah, I think that the certainty of the death row thing is just quite... It hits home a lot harder than some bloke that you don't know if he's done it or not, which I know a lot of people find clever. I find mildly irritating.
Yeah, okay.
But what are your thoughts of Shawshank? What are your memories of it?
I mean, to be honest, my memories of it are so hazy. It's just one of those films that it's sort of thrust upon you at a very sort of early age. I'd sort of put it in the same sort of pantheon of films in that regard, not necessarily as a reflection of quality, but it's films like, like Titanic.
Right,
Pulp Fiction, films that are like, seen as like the films.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is one of those films because it's wrestling for top spot in the IMDb top 250, which is to me a pretty accurate reflection of the sort of mainstream tastes.
Yeah.
And that again, we're worried that we're going to come across like twats when we talking. But it is like mainstream entertainment. It's a film that is very much, again, there's a sort of saccharine approach in the way it sort of shows the sort of themes and ideas that sort of exist around the prison film. We said them earlier, the idea of sort of fighting an oppressed system, and that sort of being a guiding light for other people, that may have lost hope in this setting, in a setting which encourages that loss of hope. And the idea that these sort of institutions are, supposed to rehabilitate and help is obviously something that, when you're in those sort of, I've never been to prison, and hopefully I don't go to prison, unless no. But you know what I mean. It's like it's sort of pretty clear that from the sort of the sort of data that's done on this kind of thing, that it doesn't really work in that way. So there's this sort of feeling that prison is sort of almost like a business, and a representation of a sort of socio-economic system that is incredibly oppressive and inherently racist. And I think when you say about the idea of like, Green Mile, obviously the sort of more sort of fantastical elements of the film have come under criticism through the lens of that sort of realization about
through the lens of kind of almost sort of racist caricature. Actually, that's what I've heard.
Okay, and which you could understand, right?
Yeah, completely. In 1999, that wasn't anyone's concern at all. I mean, not that it wasn't like a problem back then.
It wasn't a concern for the top brass in Hollywood. Put it that way.
No, I don't. I think the intention was pure. It's just when shone under a new light, it is quite apparent. But still, there is something about the finality of the Green Mile which I think really is more powerful, and it adds a layer of complexity to what is actually quite a basic story, right? Like, in some ways, most films are about people that are imprisoned one way or another, like metaphorically most of the time. And you can see that across all sorts of genres, and a character arc would be someone starting off imprisoned and ending up free, and that happens in prison films as well, right? Especially Shawshank with the ending, but on the beach kind of thing. There's something which I'm thinking about it within the after having seen Sing Sing yesterday. And it kind of, and the way it handles these themes, and it's all very lofty and all very kind of operatic. And I actually think, having seen a film which I consider to be superior, it does sort of tar it with a brush a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I sort of want to save this obviously for the review section, but can't resist.
No,
like I think those ideas that are handled by sort of Darabont et al. They're doing it through the lens of they want this sort of feeling, a good feeling within their audience, right? Within the person watching the film. Whereas in Sing Sing, I think there is an intention with that in a different way in one of the other themes of the film, which we'll discuss later. But, all of these ideas that we've sort of mentioned earlier, the sort of more broad sort of societal issues, they're condensed so well within the sort of behaviours of the characters and the way that the characters express their sort of frustrations and their sort of happinesses and their sadness and all that kind of stuff, whereas in these films it's there's almost like a sweeping orchestral piece to every sort of realization or every moment. And I just think it's really strange that like these kinds of films are so popular and they obviously resonate with a lot of people, but the same people would be sort of very critical of anyone that went to prison.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And we talk about this idea of like, this phrase that we like to coin quite a lot, temporary moral realignment.
Oh,
when you watch a film, you come out thinking, oh God, isn't that a wonderful story? But, I think a lot of people, have sort of taken the bait in the way in which sort of we are taught to view like criminality and sort of view them as people that obviously, I'm not saying that people don't deserve punishment for certain crimes, but what I'm saying is that we're encouraged to see black and white and no grey.
Oh man, yeah.
And it's weird to me that like, so many of these prison films sort of are supposed to inspire like a sort of connection to some of society's most downtrodden and in some cases pretty sort of, people have done horrible things.
Yeah.
And yet that doesn't translate to their sort of real life worldview, which I find strange, and it makes me wonder as to the actual power of these kinds of movies. I guess you could level that more broadly at cinema, not just blockbuster films or more mainstream films, but particularly with those kinds of films that I think they sort of, I don't know, there's almost like a cheapness in the way that they deploy those themes and ideas, full well knowing that the moment the person who watches it, when they run out of popcorn and they're out of the cinema in the car park, they're probably going to go back to thinking anyone that's been in prison as a scumbag.
Yeah, I mean, like, all it would take is to drive past a prison and hear someone shouting a bit, kind of jolt you back into your previous way of thinking.
Yeah.
I just think, like, this is what, like, and I do like Shawshank. I remember liking it a lot when I watched it, and I think it is a generation's favourite film for sure.
100%. Yeah,
and I have no issue with that, and I don't
not really
criticise it too much for that reason. But at the same time, the bit in the rain, like, I think maybe I'm from a sector of people that. A bit more skeptical of that sort of operatic scene. Having said that, I do love certain films which have a lot of that in it as well.
But it's definitely mood based, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, like you said, it came with the sort of folly of expectation. Is like I was expecting to watch the best film ever made when I sat down and watched it, and I remember being slightly struck by its length and the fact that it was just a very normal, very well made, well acted. With a good script, but just a kind of a normal film. I was like, oh, that was Shawshank, was it? Like, okay,
straight down the line. It's a down the line kind of movie, right?
Exactly. Yeah. With a real Hollywood beginning, middle, and end, and also none of the characters are particularly complex or violent. Like, I remember, I was thinking about this, and I was like, I don't remember a single moment in which they are portrayed as being frustrated to the point of being kind of violent, which I maybe
volatile at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe violence with words, I guess. But they all seem quite calm and sort of weirdly accepting of the situation they're in. And I don't know, maybe to me that isn't very complex. I think it's pretty straightforward.
No, but then I guess we sort of talk about it in that way, but the film's intention is to not be like that. We said in our opening, perhaps in rather twatty fashion, that films like Alien Romulus don't exist to linger with you in a way that makes you think more broadly about the way of the world, or they exist to sort of entertain you primarily. Although I would argue that Alien and Aliens definitely linger with me. I don't know. I could argue with myself about this. Maybe it's just more that I'm not that keen on Alien Romulus, but I sort of feel like films like Shawshank maybe exist on a similar plane. Like it's a film that's supposed to make you feel happy.
Yes,
and and I'm not necessarily going to begrudge people that want to watch a film that makes them feel happy, even if it's just a weird setting to do that. Yeah,
it's pretty. I mean, I always forget it's just based on a Stephen King story. And it's weird to remember that. Actually, it's constructed almost to the point of it not containing much semblance to reality, although I'm sure he did his research, but there is something about it which feels very false in a sense. Looking back on it, I've only seen it once. I've actually only seen it one time. I've seen The Green Mile a bunch, and I don't know why I hold that in a bit more. Same director, same writer, and yet there's something about that which I kind of cling on to a bit more.
I can see that.
It's fucking long. It's like 3 hours, Green Mile.
Is it?
Yeah.
Honestly, again, that's another film that is sort of another one of those films that go, "Wow, you need to see this."
It's bookended by a like fairly pointless. You meet the characters and they're elderly, and then it kind of jumps back in time, and you meet Tom Hanks as he was then, kind of thing. I think chop that.
That's a very 90s thing, though.
Oh, massively, yeah.
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That's a very sort of like blockbuster 90s narrative device, isn't it?
The way we tell the story to you is via the main characters who are reflecting on it themselves.
Yeah. Just happen to catch up at this moment where they're sort of sat there being all wistful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like it, even if it's quite naff, but it sort of suits the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No, interesting. Could have done with probably revisiting both films, but as you say, they're both quite long, and
man,
I'm a busy guy.
Yeah, no.
Rather, watch other films.
Yeah.
I maybe should have watched these films in preparation for this episode.
Maybe I should have rewatched Shawshank, and I might have come out a little bit more positive things to say about it. But at the moment, I'm quite skeptical about it for some reason. Don't know why.
Yeah, I just think, a film of that stature, a film that everyone, there's this sort of, again, this aura around it. I think it's, it's the same thing. I'm sure anyone listening will agree with this. Is like, when someone tells you about a TV show, you need to watch this TV show.
Yeah.
You immediately sort of get your back up, don't you?
I want to be contrarian now, kind of like, yeah.
It invites that sort of thing, doesn't it? You almost want to piss on their face.
Bonfire. Yeah.
Do you not do that when people recommend stuff to you? Just walk around drinking loads of Evian, like, right, if someone recommends Stranger Things again, they're fucking getting it. It's been 6 seasons of this shit. Jesus Christ, cut it out. I've actually only seen the first season, thought it was alright, so notoriously terrible television. Not because of an arrogance that I think that films are better. I do prefer films, but I just can't commit to TV shows. Yeah. That's a different topic for another time. But yeah, no, I feel like people do, you are, I think it's a natural sort of thing to respond to be excessively recommended something that you just eventually think, fuck this, I don't want to engage with it. Or the flip side is you go into it thinking, God, this is going to be amazing. Yeah. And this pedestal slowly sort of, you start to question why it's on it as you watch it, because it's not necessarily the film's fault.
No,
it's the sort of hype around it and the way people treat it and talk about
looking
it.
Looking for holes almost.
Which is a really twatty thing to do.
Yeah, big time.
But you just can't help it because of the way it's been framed to you. I think it's all in the framing sometimes.
But then there's no. That's not the people. That's not necessarily the fault of the people who are framing it in that way, because they had such a great positive experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
They want to share it with you, and it's a lovely thing to do. But it paradoxically can mean sort of a bit of a negative viewing experience.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the other side of that is the kind of prison films that wallow in the grottiness. And there's also prison escape films. I was thinking Escape from Alcatraz, which is a fucking banger of a film.
Yeah. The Rock. Is The Rock that's Sean Connery?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
I enjoy that film.
Yeah, I do like that. But, I like those kinds of films. I mean, is it Don Siegel, I want to say, who did Escape from Alcatraz? Pretty sure it was.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
One of his sort of many Clint Eastwood collaborations. But that's just a real, muscular, well-made prison escape film.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, and again, I guess you could argue there's the thematic element of, again, these sort of the looming spectre of an oppressive system, but I think that film is more sort of preoccupied with the method of escaping something which is supposedly, not theoretically, supposedly impossible to escape.
Yeah, so it's designed to be inescapable, and so it requires human ingenuity and strength and toil to get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the whole premise is just screenwriting gold, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
It's just one of those. Just lends itself so well to an hour and a half.
yeah, and again, it's like being sort of based on a real escape attempt, which no one knows how it ended.
Yeah, of course.
There's an ambiguity there, which I know can sometimes be frustrating, particularly in a more sort of conventional Hollywood sense, but it works in the sense of Escape from Alcatraz.
Yeah. Oh, man, I forgot about that as a real story. Then they never found them.
Yeah.
They just never found the boat or anything, did they?
Did they find the boat? I can't remember.
Maybe they found the boat, but not the person. And there's been like 6 or 7 deathbed confessions. So
it's just lost
back to square one.
Yeah.
It's like Dan Cooper, DB Cooper, same kind of scenario, isn't it?
Yeah. But no, prison escape films are The Rock. Fuck, I forgot about
that. Michael Bay.
Yeah, one of his good ones.
Yeah. Like quite an entertaining sort of his filmmaking style is, it just sort of happens to work. I think.
There's some big performances in it.
Yeah,
it's suitably silly.
Yeah,
but I like that movie.
Good blockbuster.
Yeah.
And that again, it just goes back to that sort of effortless screenwriting. And like, I've seen a film called Escape to Pretoria. I think it's like a Daniel Radcliffe vehicle.
Oh yeah.
And there's something really cool in that, and it's sort of quite unique about how they made keys, and they like fashioned the keys to their cells out of nothing, and like there's always a unique spin. There has to be something unique about the way these particular people escape from this particular prison.
Yeah, and they're in prison for expressing sort of anti-apartheid
Yes,
beliefs.
that's right.
So for the benefit of historical hindsight, you're already on their side.
Yeah.
So. I think that helps as well in an escape film. You wouldn't have someone that was like a fucking violent, mass murdering maniac as your sort of principal protagonist. So I really want him to get out. I wonder what he's going to do. Get a house, settle down.
Oh.
No, he hasn't.
He's gone right back to the way he was before, except worse.
Yeah, he's more annoyed.
Yeah. He's like a wasp trapped under a pint glass.
Yeah, but the pint glass has loads of weaker insects in it. I don't know. I'm trying to think of I'm not an entomologist.
There's definitely
what a terrible metaphor.
Yeah.
Sorry, I really ruined that.
Don't worry. No, I get you. You're trying to add the...
Yeah, I'm trying to add a flake, but you'd already nailed it. You already nailed it.
What other prison films are there? I mean, there's loads of examples.
A Prophet?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a sort of bit hesitant to talk about that in great detail because I saw that probably in the first year of uni, and that was during a period where I was like, shit, I haven't watched enough films, so I was watching 2 or 3 films a day, but more so just to say that I'd seen them and tick them off. But I do remember the aesthetic of that film being ground level sort of. Is it a rise through the ranks of the sort of prison hierarchy?
Yeah, okay.
And the way in which that sort of rising the ranks is, it's almost, again, it sort of exposes the imperfections of society, that, criminality and the sort of, it infects the supposedly sort of ironclad laws that are supposed to sort of keep these people incarcerated and turn them around, but really it just becomes a sort of festering, any excuse to use the word festering, but, it just becomes a sort of hotbed for criminality to continue and thrive.
Right, okay, but within the walls.
Within the walls of a sort of an institution which is supposed to represent the sort of strong arm of the law, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's a good film.
Yeah,
very visceral.
It made me think.
Is there a bit where he hides a blade in his mouth and slashes someone up? Is that in A Prophet?
It's been a really long time since I watched that. I think it was similar to you. I probably hired the same one from the library. Actually,
probably mean you were fighting for it when you didn't even realise.
What is that film called? Midnight? Is it Midnight Run or Midnight?
Oh, with
Oh no, that's fucking Robert De Niro.
Yeah, that's a good film, but yeah,
it's definitely a prison film. It's about a bloke who gets caught with some weed at an airport, but it's one of those countries where the prison system's really backwards and incredibly intolerable and just very kind of dirty, and a lot of people die in there, sort of going to prison in Thailand or something. Oh, Midnight Express. You ever seen that?
Midnight Express? I don't think I have.
Yes, it's about someone who gets caught smuggling drugs out of Turkey. He gets thrown in prison. It's a proper, again, ground level, sort of very gritty. Probably it was the late 70s, where I think the idea behind the film was to show people how awful it can be in foreign prisons.
Right.
So I don't think it will. I don't think the themes necessarily would hold up today, where I think these kinds of conditions are a lot more well known, and there's a lot more kind of activism from a Western point of view to get people out of these situations. But it was quite good. It's just sort of you're with him and you're yearning for him to get out really badly, and it's he gets sicker and sicker and thinner, and it's a kind of performance driven film. But it's one of those, again, it's very wallowy.
Okay.
And it's a breath of fresh air, spoiler alert, when he does escape or get out.
Yeah.
And that's what the catharsis is, I think, with some of these films, is just watching people be free at the end. It's it's a very simple way of giving an audience a happy ending, I think.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Handled better in some films than others, I think.
Yeah.
So I just thought Hunger.
Oh.
You said Steve McQueen. I think you were talking about the actor Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of the director. Steve McQueen starring
What-
Michael Fassbender.
What a great film that is.
Really good, really weirdly. I don't know if watchable is the right word, but it's got a pace to it considering its subject matter.
Totally compelling, yeah.
And there's like an unbroken 20-minute take of him just because I think it illustrates quite powerfully what not eating can do to the human body, and not just getting weaker, but also your body sort of starts to actively reject anything you put in it, and it's very hard hitting. And I think I just remember it being a grueling but rewarding experience with Michael Fassbender's probably still his best role, I'd say, actually.
Yeah, I get behind that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think so. So it's obviously set against the backdrop of the sort of that tumultuous period of history, the sort of oppressive attitudes of the British state on Ireland, and that's handled. Obviously the hunger strikes are a response to that, aren't they? And
peaceful. I say peaceful in a loose sense.
Yeah,
Just a way of getting your message out there in a kind of a very backwards fashion of just kind of accentuating the abuse that you're already facing to your own body as well. And I thought that the way it handled that was
incredibly powerful
metaphor.
and a really sort of powerful way to demonstrate that, and really well captured by Steve McQueen, the director. Weirdly, again, it's a film that tail end of uni, that one I saw.
Yeah,
I think
because I've seen a few of his films since. Shame.
Yeah,
Which,
another decent Fassbender performance in that, actually.
Yeah, but I always thought it was interesting how that was thematically very different.
Sort of sexual repression, isn't it? And
but it just kind of he as a filmmaker, he has a real style and a real way to get under your skin, and he achieved that in exactly the same way as he did Hunger, but for
Hunger's
something
a
incredibly
better film, I'd say.
I think maybe Shame falters in the sense that the subject matter just isn't as interesting to me.
Yeah, okay.
Although the way it portrays sex has never been so less sexy.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a way that it does that. It kind of achieves that, and it's kind of just laid out in front of you, and you're like, this is just quite nasty to watch. But I think Hunger is definitely the better of the two. I
think he's a very there's a lot of he's quite a sensory filmmaker.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a lot of interesting sort of choices, sort of aesthetically and in terms of sound design, which really sort of support the sort of loftier moments or themes of the film, be it sort of the historical backdrop of the sort of the sort of fractious relations between the British state and Ireland, and also the broader themes more broadly of prison and its function in society. I think it's a fucking great movie.
I love that film.
Yeah,
I need to rewatch that film. Maybe after Shawshank.
Just do a prison-a-thon. Papillon.
Yeah,
another. We're just rattling through films based on very hazy memory of them. But that's Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen.
The
actor.
Yes,
that's where the connection is there, obviously, from the last. Again, another film about human spirit.
This is a very, 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 very common thing amongst films about incarceration. Is you're forced to be, you're stuck with characters, some of whom might be on surface level unsavory, but then obviously it invites you into their lives and why they did or didn't do what they might or might not have done, and it kind of it invites you to kind of dig through their complex past and their complex lives and how and what they're going to do when they get out, and and it's just a very weirdly relatable scenario, even if you've never been to prison. It's the fact that these characters are complex it makes them very relatable, and it makes you think about your own misfortunes or maybe things you're not proud of and how you process that kind of thing. So I think they're cathartic in that way.
Yeah, and it sort of offset well against the sort of way in which they're treated, because
Yeah.
it sort of reflects that. I think we said about it earlier, but the sort of broader societal view, sort of out of sight, out of mind, and within that means that they probably live under quite sort of dehumanizing conditions.
Yes, yeah.
So they're stripped of the humanity as a punishment.
Yeah.
But in the process of being stripped of that humanity, there is sort of no real way in which they can rebuild themselves.
No, yeah.
And in a way that could be meaningful enough for them when they do get released back into society, obviously crime dependent, that they, can sort of move on and reflect on that experience and use that to sort of push them onto something better.
Yeah.
And, is there going to be a society there that's going to welcome them back if that transition is successful?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think maybe it's probably given a bit too much Papillion to sort of say all that in the context of that film, but I guess prison films more broadly. But I do remember it being quite a stark film in the way in which they're treated.
Okay, yeah.
And I think it's one of the sort of more layered Steve McQueen performances and the sort of portrayal of the decline of his mental state whilst incarcerated.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Steve McQueen, he is a good actor, but he did sort of get typecast as this sort of butter smooth bloke.
Looking out into the distance.
Yeah, he was sort of handsome enough to sort of fight, talk, or shag his way out of any scenario, especially in The Great Escape.
yeah, of course, yeah.
Actually, that's a good point. Prisoner of War films.
Yeah, I was just thinking Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah, what
David
a film
Bowie.
that is. Yeah. Great film.
I love that film. Prisoner
Grand
of War.
Illusion.
Oh, fuck, yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's a good film. Stalag.
The Stalag Luft.
Stalag 17.
Okay.
Billy Wilder.
Oh, right,
That's a
okay.
fucking great film.
Is that World War II?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a German...
Yeah, they're in a German POW camp.
POW camp,
Yeah.
Okay. I think Prison of War films are easier to kind of... The characters are less morally complex and...
Yeah, I guess in the context of like World War II films particularly, there is a sense that if you're like an Allied prisoner, you can do no wrong.
No, you've been wronged.
Yes.
And you just want to get back to your family by Christmas kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're yearning for freedom, but not because... But you have nothing to reflect on, or you haven't done anything wrong. You're just you're unfortunate.
Yeah. It's interesting that in like World War One prisons, you were probably better off going to World War One prison than you were staying on the front, because there was still sort of very those kind of like archaic traditions about sort of gentlemanly combat. Even though World War One was a fucking ghastly war, and the sort of obviously the innovation that took place to make killing people en masse easier. There was this sort of bizarre undercurrent of like good job, sir, and all that sort of thing. It was like quite strange. Whereas I think as conflicts progressed, that sort of died a little bit, and I think the conditions and the ideas of sort of chivalry and respect possibly still present. I don't know, but I think it's Stalag 17. It's sort of there, and but that sort of focuses more on how like they're in this sort of setting, and it's hard to conceive the idea they're never not going to be in this setting. Yeah. So there are some people that are like side with the Germans more. And in the case of Stalag 17, there's someone that is basically ratting them out for their escape plan. And a significant chunk of the film is them trying to work out who the rat is.
Right, yeah. Because
this person's obviously thinking, well, who knows how long this fucking war's going to go on for. Should I be loyal to fucking Queen and country or the stars and stripes when I could, it's almost like this idea that you're trying to sort of survive.
Yeah.
But not survive through camaraderie or through the desire to escape, but actually just making the best of your situation, even if that means going at odds with people that you ideologically or nationally should be on the side of.
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, I never thought about it in that way. Of just it is a kind of you could be seen as a sort of quite a selfish way to deal with things, but also in the face of survival, if you've got to look after number one, right? And if the way to do that is to kind of leave the reason why you joined up in the first place behind, like, you're going to do that. I think I'd crumble and do that really quickly.
It was their idea.
Yeah. I support. Yeah, you guys. You
guys are great.
Yours.
Yeah. Any more biscuits? Yeah. See you later, lads. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a brilliant film, but it's interesting. Oh, Bernie's chiming up. He offers he must love Stalag 17. Big
man.
Billy Wilder fan.
Yeah, you are, aren't you? Insert another bark there.
Insert another bark. But it's it's interesting that they're the sort of villain of the film.
Yes, yeah.
So this idea of betraying your country, betraying your comrades is. But I think I might be wrong, but I think it's sort of handled. I mean, because Billy Wilder, I don't think he's someone that necessarily plays to convention in a way that perhaps one would expect filmmakers of that time. But I think he does layer it a little bit, and you do sort of feel a little bit of sort of sympathy for that individual,
right.
Even if he has done something which ultimately fucks over a lot of people. And of course, it ends up. I think it seems to remember it ending quite well for the escapers.
Oh, really?
Escapees. I can't quite remember again. A long time, but the nuts and bolts of the film. But yeah, I just think that idea of how, in a way, that all of that sort of the war is sort of happening around you. The war's over for you.
Yeah, of course.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to adapt to that sort of the new setting. You have to
deal with shame as well, maybe.
Yeah,
the shame
absolutely.
of being captured.
Yeah. Come on.
Sorry about that. Just a bit of a pause there. The dog needed to go outside.
Yeah, I was sort of as we were talking about Stalag 17, that he started whimpering, and it started making me worry that we sound like we've just started like a sort of illegal dog farm or something to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Until we get the our merch going. That's the only way we can make money.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, and I morally don't feel great about it.
No.
But at the same time, it's I mean, how else am I going to afford my Soleros?
Exactly. It's a shame, really, because you've spent the last 59 episodes cultivating this sort of persona of working in television. But we actually just sort of have loads of dogs in cages. And
yeah. It's a nightmare to edit them out, actually. Yeah.
You should work in TV.
Yeah, I mean,
the moment we get rid of the last batch of Labradors, we'll go clean.
I have to lie to myself sometimes. Actually, pretend I do work in television, and it works quite well most of the time. I have that kind of dawning realization sometimes that my circumstances are not quite as sparkly as I once.
And it didn't help that what sort of paltry funds we make from this illegal enterprise we spent on a actress to play Hannah.
Yes,
in last week's episode.
Yeah, she keeps emailing me asking for because obviously we gave her an advance.
Yeah. She wants the sort of second half,
and she wants a rabies jab as well.
Yeah,
because of the dog.
Well, she can
pay
for that herself. We didn't. That wasn't in the contract.
No, it wasn't.
Verbal.
Read the small print
in wax crayon.
Contract, yeah.
In your contract. Partridge Ref, we love those. Yeah. Prison films. I think we've sort of banged on enough about Stalag 17.
I remember watching one called Gridiron Gang starring The Rock once, and this is bargain bin territory.
Yeah,
that was naff. Really. It's weird though because the plot line followed the same trajectory as a lot of prison films.
Yeah,
and prison films concern themselves with rehabilitation. So in this case, it's football, which enables the prisoners.
The longest yard, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the similar sort of scenario, whereby recreation forces the prisoners out of their way of thinking and into a more hopeful future.
Ties in with Sing Sing.
Exactly. So, but it's weird that Gridiron Gang, starring The Rock, didn't. It followed the same trajectory, and yet the way it was made and the way it was kind of, the bargain bin thing, it just kind of didn't strike a chord. I've only just recently remembered that I watched it in the first place. There's a bit in it where he's consoling a young boy, and he just goes, "You're a good kid, Roger." Yeah, it's one of those.
Right, yeah. I think we've talked about this before in the context of bargain bin films. Yeah. But like their role is to sort of like take the sort of dominant sort of narratives in mainstream entertainment and then just siphon them through like a naff lens, like a naff cheap lens.
Just strip them of all nuance.
Yeah.
what the sort of Shawshank is at absolute face value.
Yeah,
Just kind of made into a film of its own.
Yeah.
And
just none of the effort sort of... It is just aping it, isn't it?
yeah,
In the
it's
worst
a
possible...
mockbuster almost.
Yeah. I always find it weird that they exist and yet they're so popular.
I know. I remember being excited to watch it. Someone from school, I lived next to them, and his mum like rented it from the kind of local, the corner shop. He's like, I got this new film starring The Rock. Because we both quite like that film, Welcome to the Jungle.
Okay, yeah.
She's like, oh, you'll love this. It's like it's about American football in a prison, and we were like, oh.
Rock, that was when he was in that territory. He did Walking Tall. Was that the same sort of era?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same thing. It was before he went completely bald. He still had a bit of hair.
Okay.
And
but then there's also a remake of Walking Tall starring Kevin Sorbo.
Really?
It really speaks to the sort of cannibalistic attitudes of sort of bargain bin cinema, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's one with Kevin. I might have just made that up. Maybe that's like my ultimate film, my fantasy.
Maybe
Kevin Sorbo dispensing justice as a small town sheriff. If he doesn't do it, I'll be disappointed. No, I'm not doing it. Yeah, no, it is interesting. And the bargain bin thing also works in terms of the sort of more grubby exploitation-y sort of style. Where like
cheaply made.
Yeah, there's less concern about the sort of moral value of the film that's being made.
Mm.
You know, it's sort of made for the sort of fist pumping, beer swilling, sort of lonely man to watch at 4 a.m.
That's it. Yeah, there is no like real worth in them for me, but the fact that they exist, particularly prison films. I mean, it must just be easy enough to find an abandoned facility to film in very cheaply, and you can get Adrian Brody in as for a bit.
Yeah. There's a little film with him and Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, The Experiment. Another prison film.
I remember one part of the film that really struck me. I mean, how old is that film? I feel like I watched
7 or something. Yeah.
Well, so I was quite young when I watched it, but the thing that really struck me, there's a bit where Forrest Whitaker takes control and he's staring himself in the moon. He's got a boner. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
That is like a really formative cultural moment for me. Just Forrest Whitaker's fat willy throbbing in his... Was it real? Who knows?
I mean, I need to rewatch it.
I mean, immense commitment to the role for him if it was.
Only him. Maybe he it's only him in the makeup department who truly know.
Yeah.
And the director thinks it's a prosthetic.
Yeah, but Adrian Brody knows.
Yeah, Adrian Brody was also part of the makeup department. So.
Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
Dual salary. Quids in for Brody.
Yeah, the Broadster. Yeah, no, that's a weird film. And I guess, again, it's sort of like Stanford Prison Experiment sort of thing, isn't it? This sort of, again, speaks to this sort of more malevolent and evil side of society, that these people are basically like hamsters or like rats in a maze. Yeah, and there's something slightly conspiratorial about that story as well, which feeds quite nicely into that bargain bin-esque territory, and also an urban legend. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm fairly sure it did happen in some capacity, but there's a mystique about that particular story which can be filled with by Forrest Whitaker's big willy,
big penis, yeah. And also sort of just Hollywood stuff.
yeah.
But chiefly Forrest Whitaker's member.
Shall we pivot from that to Sing Sing?
I think so. Yeah.
Which I never thought I'd say.
Yeah. I never thought I'd say.
Oh.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I think we sort of said this earlier, but I think one of the most immediately commendable things to me about how I felt when I came out of the film was the way all of these themes and ideas about so said it loads, but they're sort of confined into that sort of, because it's quite a sort of tight aspect ratio, isn't it?
Yeah, 1.66 to 1.
Good, I'm glad you knew that. Yeah, I was banking on that. But it almost sort of, there's so much of it going on, but it's so contained. It's contained in the aspect ratio.
Yeah,
which is
1.66 to 1. Yeah, it's tall, and it gives off the impression that you're confined in a space, which is what you want in a film like this.
100%, and it accentuates what is obviously by design something that is
oppressive, yeah.
And I just thought that was really quite commendable in the sense that it's the sort of an understanding that the lived experience of that life of being incarcerated and all of the societal mechanisms that contribute to that, that is enough, that story enough.
Yeah.
And the way that is sort of, the way in which is sort of like, drip fed through the way the characters interact with one another or reflect on their behaviour, reflect on the kind of people they were or the people they are.
Yeah.
And the desire they have to escape, but it's never done in a way that feels, again, like this sort of sweeping orchestral moment that you're supposed to get behind.
The closest it gets to that is he's got a space that he likes to go to.
Yeah.
And he reaches out and sort of tries to touch it, but it doesn't ever. The music doesn't ever swell. It keeps to that handheld, claustrophobic sort of style, and it's just quite a nice moment. It doesn't dwell on it for too long. It doesn't do a kind of Peter Jackson. As much as I love him, he is guilty of that, I think, sometimes. But you're right. It's very. It kind of, the way it presents being confined and being incarcerated is sort of very matter of fact. It doesn't devote any time to trying to portray what that's like too much. The
only moments like that happen are when like they come in and check the rooms and just basically trash their rooms.
Oh yeah,
and they have to reorder their room.
That's right. Yeah.
And
the
which
presence
is
of the
obviously
guards is very like minimal. Though.
Yeah, it gives it like a lived-in quality. Like,
yeah.
Not that it's sort of like accepted to the point where people are sort of living in a sort of state of calm and or relative happiness, but it's their reality, it's their setting, it's through that the themes that are sort of inherent within the prison film are actually sort of stronger.
Yeah,
because the fact that this is like an everyday reality for them. It gives it a sort of a living, breathing, almost sort of tangible quality.
Yeah,
that strengthens those themes in a way that the sort of lofty operatic way, for me personally, just doesn't. And I particularly like the way in which their attempts to break out of this sort of way of life are through the same system that keeps them there.
Yeah.
So the sense that they're sort of powerless. And a lot of the things that make them powerless, be it their sort of socioeconomic position or their race, or it's their only hope is to sort of try and appeal to that system that is so callous and so cruel, that has sort of put them in this situation. Be sort of just simple as sort of geography, where they are or who they are. They've started. They've been born into a world or a part of the world that is rife with poverty and struggle, to the extent that the only way that they can see a way out of this sort of mire is through a life of crime. Just as a tool of survival. I thought it was particularly interesting in the case of the lead character that in one of his sort of monologues he talks about he was like an aspiring dancer.
That's right. He talks about ballet, doesn't
he? Yeah.
He says that a ballet is actually all about poise and it's very physical and
you have to be strong and and all these sorts of preconceived notions, which I guess are sort of very prevalent in are definitely more prevalent in sort of like that sort of masculine view of things, is that it's like subject to ridicule, and it sort of deliberately sort of ignores the sort of immense sort of physicality and sort of mental and physical strength required to sort of succeed in dance or ballet, and you get the sense that the younger version of his character stopped doing it because of how people felt about him. And he was trying to break out and find something, creativity, art, to help him in a world where that wasn't the accepted way to escape. And that also speaks more broadly to the one of the bigger themes of the film. Alongside that is the importance of rehabilitation, the importance of art and creativity as a tool to rehabilitate and as a tool to heal, and as a tool to help people escape their predicament. And that's something not to sort of deprive the sort of thematic impact of the film, but if you take it more broadly, like, why are we so fucking into movies? Why do we why do we talk about them all the time? it's because it's like respite from some of the other stuff in life that we're perhaps not that happy with or comfortable about.
Yeah.
And in a prison setting, obviously that's like up to 11, you know?
Well, I
for
mean,
them, it's their way of expressing themselves in a situation where there is no expression, and it's free of judgment, and it's safe, and there isn't many spaces for people like them in that situation to do so.
Yeah, what I found interesting, what I think the kind of film attempted to tackle, I thought succeeded quite well, is like, it's funny to me how it took them getting imprisoned it had to reach that point before they were able to sort of express themselves in a way that they felt comfortable with each other in a kind of very masculine setting. Because they're all of those characters, even the lesser characters, are clearly struggling with, you know, what it means to be like a man and masculine, and how to kind of express anything. And there's a lot of very sweet moments where they all kind of are sharing stuff, and it's very like touching, and it doesn't feel sort of forced or anything. And it's just all that time I was thinking, wow, it took you getting imprisoned to have to get to this point, and what would have happened to you as human beings had you not been in prison.
Or more, I guess in another sense you could say, how sad is it that this sort of provision isn't in society anyway? Yeah,
exactly. What kind of life were you leading before for you not to feel uncomfortable with this, to the point where now it is kind of a comfort to you, or it is kind of your reality now. It's making you kind of break down in tears as opposed to just talking about it more openly. And also, like with the main character, Divine G, right? His name. He at the beginning fancies himself a little bit. I think he's almost got too used to this system.
Yeah, he's obviously someone that is, he's a very talented, well-read, and passionate man about the arts and creativity, particularly theatre and performance.
Yeah, and we meet him at his high almost.
Yeah, like he is the sort of king in this realm, and
it's Hamlet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it speaks to sort of the layers of Coleman Domingo's performance, that obviously you're totally on side with him throughout, because it's such a magnificent performance. The
vulnerability is really subtle at the beginning.
It's just so well done. Like, even in this setting, like where it is about openness and honesty, and as sort of the baseline, the foundational layers for self-improvement. Yeah, he still feels this need to be the centre of attention, and he's obviously very proud of what he's done in there. And obviously what he's doing is it's an altruistic act. He is ultimately a very decent individual. But there's also a part of him that's like, I understand theatre, I get it. And even when he's like sort of giving people acting notes, when he sort of steps in the behalf of the director, you sort of sense that this sort of, he's sort of like, well, I know what I'm doing, Which I thought was really interesting, and a really bold move, and I think it's a move that humanises him. It humanises him in the sense that he's obviously just very passionate, and he loves what he does, and it's a risk that the film, not necessarily a risk that is detrimental to his character, but it humanises him further to show a sniff of imperfection.
Oh, massively, yeah.
Which none of the other films would fucking ever dream of doing.
No, they would never be centre stage. Like the character, the reason why the characters in prison are by their very nature humbled. So they're written as humbled and mousy almost. Whereas this guy is like, at the beginning of the film, he's like right at the top of his game, and I would say the word to use is probably a little bit even sort of slightly delusional in the way that he sort of navigates this topic, right? In this case, acting and theatre and the arts. He kind of, the way he acts is almost like he can go home at night, whereas he can't. And
that's central to the delusion, isn't it?
Exactly.
That it is like he is the reason. I think he commits himself so fully to it, to the point of coming across almost a little bit sort of. He's almost quite diminutive.
Yeah.
It is because of how much it has helped him. to realize about himself and to also escape from the fucking shittiness of his situation.
Yeah. But like they do something. I won't give too much away, but they do something with him, and it's all to do with his ultimate desire to leave, which is quite well masked throughout the film, because he's loving what he's created and his interactions with these other men, but ultimately he wants to go home.
Yeah.
and that becomes a real, that actually becomes where the complexities lie. That's not the simple thing he's striving towards, like all these other characters and all these other prison films. That is the thing that breaks him. And you wouldn't expect that at the beginning of the film, and like there's something that happens which, and there's a kind of the way he's sort of introducing a kind of fellow inmate who he's observed as being quite good at acting, and quite good at performing, I suppose. Yeah. And there's a kind of interaction between these two men, and they kind of grow fond. They kind of they meet in the middle, don't they? But then there's just the way that they handle his desire to go home, and his kind of, and how that can push people away from him, and how that what I should say is how that makes him push other people away is really interesting, like quite unique. It doesn't sound unique the way I'm describing it. It sounds really
No, I think you did a bang up job.
Yeah.
I think you're right, and it's interesting as well that this other character that enters his world is, for lack of a better term, he is the sort of stereotypical sort of gangster type.
Yeah.
That I think has been sort of almost reaffirmed by culture. And the way in which they sort of pick apart the layers of his character. Coleman Domingo's character assists him in helping him to do that and feel comfortable about the idea of performing, and sort of revealing more about himself and how he can try and better himself despite the sort of the obvious barriers that are in the way for him. And I thought you're absolutely right. There's that sort of almost like a role reversal between them,
big time.
Because that sort of side of the Coleman Domingo's character's life, which he's hidden away, explodes. And because of his disappointment, and because of his very understandable sort of disappointment at not being able to leave this place that has wrongfully imprisoned him.
A system he is kind of grown to, or sort of run parallel with, has failed him, and he wasn't expecting it to fail him. Basically, he thought that if I run parallel with the system, then it will do the same for me, and it doesn't do that. That is what really throws. Like you say, that role reversal was like really kind of tantalising, really interesting point in the story.
So wonderfully performed. I mean, Coleman Domingo is obviously probably the standout performance, but that chap who plays the other guy is fantastic. It's sort of subverting the sort of archetype, the masculine archetypes of that culture. And again, it's all about that word. It's sort of humanising them, and because it's sort of an interesting thing. We talk about the idea of how masculine, these people are sort of shackling the more toxic elements of masculinity, but it's that sort of toxic masculinity that is trapping them more broadly. It's pushing them, and it's what makes it so appealing. I mean, I'm talking perhaps far out of my area of my expertise, which is already a sort of very minimal pool. But I got the sense anyway, in the way the film was trying to portray it, was that this sort of oppressive, hyper-masculine force that pushed Coleman Domingo's character away from ballet, or pushes anyone from sort of expression and sort of being articulate about how they feel and who they are. It's the same thing that pushes them into these sort of archetypes, these kinds of individuals that will end up ultimately living a life of crime, and then being in prison. At least that's what I thought the film was sort of trying to say a little bit, particularly in the presentation of the sort of character.
Definitely. And there's a kind of there's a moment at the end which resolves that. I'd say, for sure. And it's something very simple, which is an acquisition of an item, which is a symbol of kind of freedom, but he's gained that through the expression and through realizing, and this is a film that doesn't look back. I loved that about it. It didn't really concern itself with the sentences or the past actions of these individuals. It was very much about where they were now and what they were looking forward to.
Yeah.
And I loved that because we didn't need to know what they'd done, really.
No.
I don't think it was tremendously important. We didn't even really need to know if they were guilty or not.
No, I mean, it's heavily implied that Coleman Domingo's character was actually wrongfully imprisoned, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think if they took that out of the film, it wouldn't have really made a huge difference to the trajectory of.
No, I don't think so. No.
But yeah.
It's also quite interesting. There's that one scene where they bring the guy in who used to be in prison with them.
Yeah.
And he talks about how, like, he obviously enjoys lots of things about freedom, but he sort of alludes to this ever-present sort of sense that is this sort of it, and also I have to sort of live with what, I have to live with obviously being in prison.
Yeah.
So regardless of what this individual has done, he still had to live with the sort of, there's the sort of potential for being psychologically damaged as a result of being in prison.
Yeah.
And then also being expected just to sort of assimilate back into society that odds are is going to look at you like shit for being in prison.
Yeah.
So, like, it doesn't necessarily suggest that there's a sort of way out for these people that is going to lead them to, like, a fucking, beautiful new dawn. But I think it's almost like the sort of the fancy of believing it through creativity. You know what I mean? And that's power enough.
Definitely. Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
That, I don't know.
No. I think the thing that they could take with them from the experience is the thing that they forged themselves, which is the ability to learn lines and sort of perform sort of naked in front of an audience. And there's some lovely clips at the end which the actual prisoners on which this film is based doing that.
Yeah,
I think that's really nice. And also there's a kind of undercurrent of the sort of serious. There's the sort of slight jibe at the seriousness of the arts, and how that can become oppressive in itself.
Yes,
There's a lovely scene at the beginning where the kind of new guy that's sort of been inducted into this whole world it just says, like, why don't we do a comedy? Right, like, why don't we do
a time traveling wacky silly thing? Yeah. The value of that is almost, that's a really it's funny. It's not something I'd sort of focusing so much on the other stuff, but that is a really interesting
real
point.
Curveball, when he says that, because I thought the whole first half of the film he wasn't going to engage with it at all, but instead he does, but in a really unexpected way that throws Coleman Domingo's character Divine G off a little bit in. And it kind of
because he sees sort of theatre as a very sort of prestigious thing, which obviously it can be, but the idea of, like, doing a comedy, it's almost like it's sort of bottom of the barrel, isn't it? It's sort of like a few rungs down from the work of Shakespeare. Although ironically enough, a lot of Shakespeare's work was sort of comedy.
Very funny.
I mean, my favourite Shakespeare play is Midsummer Night's Dream, which is like a straight-laced comedy,
like
really.
That's like the definition of a broad comedy.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But no, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, I'd not considered. And I think it's sort of almost embracing the sort of probable naffness of what the play ends up ultimately being is actually more liberating than doing anything of a highbrow nature.
Yeah. I do.
I like that. That's cool. I didn't think about that. That really, I love you.
Your opinions are just wonderful.
Just wonderful. Come here.
It's a film with a really weird release strategy. It's in cinemas, but very few cinemas. And I know it had its heyday recently in Bristol, but it's been out since 2023 worldwide. Sing Sing.
Worldwide?
I think so.
Quite Mr. Worldwide. Who's that, Mr. Worldwide? Who calls himself that?
Oh, it's in a rap.
Is it
Mr. Worldwide?
Is it
probably cut that
Bulldog?
Out. Pitbull.
Yeah. Shit. Oh god, such a square. I don't even know what Pitbull is.
I don't know why I know
Bulldog.
That, to be honest.
What the fuck am I on about? Jesus Christ. Mr. Worldwide.
Mr. Worldwide. Yeah, I know. So it's in terms of, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm going to want to watch that. It will be on streaming somewhere reasonably soon, I think, but you might have to seek it out.
It's an A24 co-production, isn't it?
Yes, they picked it up, because everyone on the film.
Or was it a co-production, or did they just distribute it?
They financed it, but only 2 weeks before production began.
Oof.
So everyone on the film got paid exactly the same amount of money. Crew, cast, everyone. Obviously, there was a day rate. But it's a really weird way of making a film. Usually there's like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
But I think the nature of the film, they had to make it like this, really.
Yeah. That sort of makes me like the film a lot more, and I already loved the movie as much as it is. But.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was fascinating reading about how they made this. Shot it in 19 days.
That's fucking crazy.
Which is less than the film Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, really?
Interested? Yeah.
How many days was that?
22.
Ooh.
I don't know why I know that. Anyway, I do.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Yeah, it's like beautifully shot as well.
It is beautifully shot film.
Looks nice. 16mm.
Real grain to it, isn't there? Real texture.
You couldn't shoot this film on digital. It wouldn't work.
No.
It had to have that grittiness.
Yeah.
That kind of style is nothing new these days, particularly with sort of lesser known A24 films, but it does work for the films.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, there's almost like an ethereal quality to the cinematography.
Yeah,
it's like a lot of lights of casting through windows and shining upon like the stage, and I mean, obviously that's sort of pretty overt, but I don't know, given the sort of tone of the film and its lack of sort of dramatic elements elsewhere, I think it was quite a nice little sort of visual touch.
Yeah, definitely speaks to the film's ultimate sort of. It's very hopeful. It's quite a hopeful film.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think it's not necessarily hopeful about the prison system or the life of people who leave prison necessarily. I think there's a broader societal critique there that is sort of left open-ended deliberately, because obviously there's this isn't being resolved, and there's a very well publicised sort of movement against the prison system and the way it's basically operating like a business.
Oh yeah.
But I think there is hope in the fact that there are people who are prepared to help these individuals rehabilitate through the arts and through creativity. Yeah,
that's why. That the sort of
that's the hopeful element. I think the fact that there's something that people can grasp hold of, and that something can be of considerable benefit to them as human beings, and treat them as human beings. And I think that's the sort of the message that that I think is sort of fairly pervasive across most prison films, and achieved to varying levels of success depending on the film. But I think particularly here, in the way it sort of humanises them without relying on sort of dramatic flair, I think it really sort of hammers home the sort of the necessity to view them as human beings and to treat them as such.
Very reliant on performance for that reason.
100%, and a lot of which were people who were former Sing Sing, and you wouldn't have fucking known.
No, not at all. I was really surprised at the end when
that acting coach is fucking good, isn't he?
Jesus, right, yeah. As himself was just like majority of the credits were just like as himself.
Yeah. That really sort of usually by the sort of credits, even a film that I really loved. I'm like desperate for a piss or something, so I was like, I've got to go. Yeah. But just seeing that repeatedly, I was like, just stay and see who was as themselves. I just think that's really wonderful.
Really, interesting way to make a film. I'm interested to follow this guy. I can't actually remember his name, the director, but Greg. I remember his first name. Quasar.
It's not cool.
That's the meteorological astronomical thing.
It's also the thing that you used to go to for a lot of birthdays as a kid.
Oh right, okay.
Quasar. Do you ever do Quasar? It's like laser tag.
Laser Quest. Okay.
Yeah. In Derby, there was a place called Quasar.
Okay, that's probably named after the spinning stars.
I remember going there and hating it. Actually, I never really liked Laser Quest.
You should have gone to a local independent cinema instead.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we should have done.
Yeah.
I just remember the kid. I mean, there was one kid who used to run up to me. He did run up to me once. I've not seen him since. He used to hit me with the gun, my pack with the gun, then press the trigger. And I remember saying to him, like, this is not how it's supposed to go. And he's like, it's not how it's supposed to go, and then ran off. I was like, you dick.
Oh man, unbelievable.
Yeah.
I wish him no goodwill.
Nothing.
No, yeah.
No. What a twat. I wasn't expecting to revisit that memory.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Cathartic at the best of times, said the boys in cinema, but especially so in that moment. Called Quasar. No, I can't remember his surname. Sorry, mate. That's really bad, isn't it?
His name was Quasar also.
Was it Quasar?
No. I don't know. Maybe.
Fucking hell, man. Anyway. We just spent ages talking about his film. We can't even fucking say his name. Oh my God, what a shambles.
Oh dear. Sorry, Greg.
Yeah, we're on a first name basis. You've done excellent work.
Yeah, do another one and I'll remember your surname.
Yeah. Don't fuck it up, Greg.
Yeah, cool, mate.
But no, brilliant film. I as you said, not going to be particularly easy to find.
No, I tried and failed to find it on a number of platforms. I had to go see it at the cinema in the end.
I mean, I desperately hope that isn't the case in a few weeks or months' time. I think, a really, really wonderful movie. And, don't be sort of put off by the fact it isn't necessarily dramatic. I think, that's...
it's really engaging despite that.
Oh, my God, yeah. Beautifully performed, wonderfully shot.
Yeah.
Coleman Domingo, I mean, he's got to be in the Oscar conversation, right?
I really hope so, yeah.
I mean, again, I don't think it's the boys' cinema were particularly that enamoured with the whole idea of the Oscars, but hey, whilst we're here, I mean, I haven't seen a better performance so far this year from a lead, personally, so he is unbelievable in this film. Like, he there was moments of his performance that it was actually like, wet the eyes.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
In a way that wasn't like, because sometimes you're just a bit susceptible to like overt attempts to make you cry, but this was like just fucking like human. This was like a real human.
Very much so.
Just pure sort of, I don't know, like empathy.
Yeah. No music, no kind of flair with the camera, just him sort of, doing something to you throughout the course of the film, which does sort of choke you up at moments. So
absolutely superb. What a performance. And can't wait for you to shout us out on your acceptance speech.
Yeah. Go on, Coleman. Please.
We need this. We'd stop selling those dogs. Right, outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
Oh yeah, good
Sing.
stuff. Sing. Yeah, good stuff. Please try and seek it out. Next week, we're going to go with Substance, I believe.
That's right. I know nothing about this film. I've only seen the poster, and I know that that it's very gory.
Yeah, it's really quite annoying actually. I've sort of ended up falling into the marketing hole of it. Generally speaking, I try and avoid any sort of buzz or sort of industry insider discussions or reviews or interviews of the cast or crew, but this film, it was almost impossible to avoid, and I ended up sort of going down a bit of a rabbit hole. I think mostly because of my apprehension towards the violence, because as I get older, I find it harder to I have to really jazz myself up and get really into the idea of watching a really violent movie before I go in, particularly if it's at the cinema.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Okay.
I'm a bit happier to watch them at home because I can pause it.
Yeah. You can look away and not have anyone else around you. Go, look at this guy.
yeah, which is a bit weird, really.
No, I think it's really interesting, and I think I'm at the moment a bit more indifferent to violence, although I have found myself telling people about scenes in films that I consider to be really violent and kind of warning them. Yeah. So I guess actually, in a way, I do have less of a stomach for it, or less of a kind of gleeful reaction to it than I once perhaps did when I was younger.
I think it's weird. I think there is almost like a childlike thing of it. I think because you're sort of, I mean, I was sort of didn't really watch too many violent films until a really set age. Do you know what I mean? And then I was sort of just bombarded with it. And I've always still treated violence in certain genres with trepidation.
Yeah, okay.
And as I've got older, I don't know, maybe they do say you do tend to get softer as you get older, don't you?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why. But we're going to go. I'm going to brave it.
Nice.
And I've heard nothing but good things, so I'm also looking forward to it.
I've heard nothing. Maybe I should try and keep it that way. I don't know what it's about or anything.
Yeah.
I did that with Sing Sing, and I was like, that was really rewarding for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll do the same with this one. It was easier for me to avoid any news about it because I was away. But we'll see. I'll have to avoid Googling it, basically. And
yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it's. Even though it's like, I think it's like a Mubi co-production.
Oh, nice.
So they're pushing it quite a lot. It's on the Mubi Go app this week.
Right, yeah.
But it's also a film that, because of its content, I think it's sort of going to bring in an audience that wouldn't necessarily come to these kinds of sort of Mubi movies.
Okay. Yeah,
I think that's why. And they have done that annoying thing where they film audience reactions during the film.
Okay. The paranormal activity.
Yeah. I think, I
Right.
guess, even studios like Mubi have got to make money, right? So they're going down that route.
I always like the idea of it, them just kind of focusing on a bunch of reactions, and then one guy like with sort of long hair and glasses, just with a massive bucket of popcorn, just eating the popcorn, and then looking up and being like, "What?"
Yeah.
I like the idea of that. Them just doing.
Or he's sort of wincing because he's sort of got his penis in the bottom.
Yeah.
Scalding his genitals with molten anchor spreadable.
Anyway.
Pour one out for that guy.
Yeah.
So we'll look forward to that one.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for sticking to the end of this episode, as always.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
We love you.
Love you.
And we'll catch you in the next one.
See you in the next one. Bye.
Keep it steady.